The arena lights burned bright as the crowd buzzed with anticipation, the atmosphere thick with the unique tension that only heavyweight boxing can create. Two men stood on opposite sides of the ring, each carrying not only their own ambitions, but the expectations of nations and fans who had followed their journeys. On one side was the imposing figure known around the boxing world as the Nigerian Nightmare, Samuel Peter, the former WBC heavyweight champion whose explosive power had once shaken the division. Across from him stood a very different kind of fighter, the slick, technically gifted American contender Eddie Chambers, a man nicknamed Fast Eddie for his quick hands and nimble movement. This was more than just another fight night. For Peter, it was a chance at redemption. For Chambers, it was a crucial step toward proving he belonged among boxing's elite heavyweights. As the introductions echoed through the arena, the crowd roared with excitement. Peter's name carried the aura of a former champion, a fighter who had battled giants and once held the crown. But the narrative around him had begun to change. His devastating loss to Vitaly Klitschko still lingered in the minds of fans and analysts alike. That fight had ended with Peter remaining on his stool, unable to continue, and it raised uncomfortable questions about his conditioning and resilience. Meanwhile, Chambers entered the ring with a different kind of reputation. He was the thinking man's heavyweight, a boxer who relied on movement, timing, and technique rather than brute strength. Yet he too carried something to prove. His lone defeat had come against Alexander Povetkin, a decision loss in Germany that critics said exposed a troubling flaw. When the pressure mounted, Chambers sometimes took his foot off the gas. Tonight, both men had the opportunity to silence their doubters. From the opening bell, the contrast in styles became immediately clear. Peter, thickly built and powerful, stalked forward with the deliberate patience of a hunter. Chambers moved lightly around the ring, bouncing on his toes and circling, refusing to give the bigger man an easy target. Chambers' strategy was obvious. Stay mobile, avoid the devastating punches Peter was famous for, and pick his moments carefully. He flicked quick jabs, testing the range and forcing Peter to reset his feet again and again. But there was something else noticeable right away, something commentators couldn't ignore. Both fighters looked heavier than usual. Peter had come into the fight at the heaviest weight of his career, tipping the scales at 265 pounds. Chambers, who had once been criticized for carrying a few extra pounds even when lighter, also looked softer around the midsection than in his best performances. Still, early in the fight, Chambers' movement was working beautifully. He wasn't dancing wildly around the ring like Muhammad Ali, but he was moving just enough to keep Peter off balance. A step here, a pivot there, small adjustments that prevented the Nigerian powerhouse from planting his feet and launching his trademark right hand. Peter tried to cut off the ring and dig punches into Chambers' body, targeting what many believed was the American's weakest area. The logic was simple. Slow the legs, drain the stamina, and eventually the target would stop moving. But Chambers was disciplined. He pulled back from the waist to make punches fall short, using upper body movement instead of always relying on his legs. It was a risky tactic. Leaning back instead of stepping away meant he was sometimes still within range, but for the most part, it kept Peter's biggest shots from landing clean. The first round closed with neither man establishing full control, but the pattern had already begun to form. In the second round, Chambers continued to circle and jab, forcing Peter to chase him. The American's defense was sharp, his gloves high and his head constantly shifting just enough to make Peter miss. But there was a growing concern among observers. Chambers was surviving well, yet he wasn't doing enough offensively. Against a fighter like Peter, simply avoiding punches wasn't enough. The bigger man needed to be forced to work, to burn energy, to feel pressure of his own. Without that, Peter could conserve his strength and wait for the one moment when Chambers made a mistake. Occasionally, Chambers would fire a quick right hand after his jab, snapping Peter's head slightly and reminding the crowd of his speed advantage. Yet too often, he returned to defense immediately instead of building combinations. Peter, meanwhile, remained patient. Though he appeared slower and heavier than in his prime, flashes of his dangerous hand speed still surfaced. When he did throw with intent, his punches cut through the air with frightening force. The fight continued into the middle rounds with a strange rhythm. Chambers controlled distance, dictating where the action took place. Peter tried to corner him, occasionally landing body shots, but rarely the devastating blow that could change the fight instantly. At times, the contest almost felt like a chess match, cautious, calculated, and frustratingly conservative. Observers began to notice that Peter's conditioning might become a factor. Carrying 265 pounds against a mobile opponent required tremendous stamina, and as the rounds progressed, his breathing became heavier. His mouth hung open more frequently now. His punches came slower, yet the opportunity was still there for Chambers to seize control completely, and he hesitated. That hesitation became one of the defining stories of the fight. Chambers' jab was working. His right hand often found its mark, but he rarely followed up with the left hook that could have turned those single punches into damaging combinations. Time and again, he landed cleanly and then stepped away instead of pressing the advantage. By the 7th round, the statistics showed Chambers landing significantly more punches. His jab had become the most consistent weapon of the night, snapping Peter's head back and disrupting his rhythm. But the fight was still close enough that a single big moment could change everything. Peter tried to rally, throwing occasional bursts of punches, but they lacked the vicious intent that once defined him. His hands dropped after jabs, leaving openings that Chambers could exploit. Yet the American continued to fight cautiously, perhaps too cautiously. As the fight entered the championship rounds of the scheduled 10-round bout, Peter looked like a car running on fumes. His movements slowed dramatically. His shoulders sagged. Sweat poured down his face as he trudged forward. The opportunity for Chambers was obvious. All he needed to do was increase the pace, throw more combinations, push the exhausted former champion backward, and make the judge's decision undeniable. Instead, he maintained the same measured rhythm. It was effective enough to keep him ahead, but not enough to dominate. The 9th round highlighted this perfectly. Chambers landed several clean jabs and right hands, showing flashes of the offensive aggression his corner had been begging for. But again, the flurries were brief. Peter, despite his fatigue, continued trying to land the one punch that could save him. The final round arrived with tension still hanging in the air. Both fighters knew the fight could hinge on these last 3 minutes. Chambers circled. Peter stalled. Punches landed here and there, but the explosive moment everyone expected from a heavyweight fight never truly arrived. When the final bell rang, both men looked relieved. Chambers had likely done enough with his speed and consistency. Peter had fought hard, but seemed betrayed by his conditioning and inactivity. The judges soon confirmed what many had suspected. The decision was awarded to Eddi Chambers, giving the American contender an important victory and a step forward in the heavyweight division. It wasn't the most thrilling fight in heavyweight history, but it told a fascinating story about discipline, preparation, and opportunity. Chambers proved that smart boxing and movement could neutralize even the most powerful punchers. Yet he also left fans wondering how dominant he might have been if he had pressed harder when the openings appeared. For Samuel Peter, the fight raised difficult questions about conditioning and consistency. The power was still there, the toughness undeniable, but the version of the Nigerian nightmare that once terrified the division seemed just a little further away. And in the unforgiving world of heavyweight boxing, that difference can mean everything. As the crowd slowly emptied from the arena and the echoes of the night faded, one thing was clear: the heavyweight division never stops evolving. Fighters rise, champions fall, and every bout becomes another chapter in boxing's unpredictable story. But what do you think? Did Eddi Chambers fight smart, or did he miss a chance to dominate a fading former champion? And could Samuel Peter have turned the fight around if he had come in better shape? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown and storytelling recap, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive into the greatest fights in boxing history.
2